Well, that's what I was referring to when I said it was disgusting. It is, of course, disgusting that you haven't shaved. But understandable. I mean, sometimes I don't shave either, and that's disgusting too.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Fawlty Towers podcast, where we have both disgustingly forgotten to shave.
I am personally disgusted at you, Gerry.
I am repulsed at both of us.
It is disgusting and we should be disgusted.
Any batteries?
Well, not for that.
Okay. How are you?
Hairy. How are you, Gerry?
Itchy. We've got an episode this week where I think it's interesting, the dynamic. Now, we touched on it last week, where they can both give as good as they get. But in this case, they are both equally as annoying as each other. Now, other sitcoms and I suppose more modern ones would have someone being the annoying character, generally the husband, and the wife might well be the yin to the yang, someone who you're meant to feel more sympathy towards. But in this episode, Sybil is just as annoying, and in some respects even more annoying than Basil.
It's all about equality, Gerry.
You think Fawlty Towers is about equality?
I could have misunderstood. I don't know.
But you know what I'm saying? Normally the dynamic would be irritating husband or other person, and the other one would be the light to the dark.
I think the interesting thing for me up to this point is that we're halfway through season 1 and they've not really, in fact probably not at all in my opinion, shown any actual affection between Basil and Sybil. There's things that you could twist and interpret as affection if you really wanted to, but there's nothing obvious where you would say like this softens it. You know, you can see he cares about her, he's doing this for her, you can see that she cares about him. There's not really been any of that.
No, and I think that is refreshing, because again, that's I suppose would be a trope, a cliche, that they bicker, but at the end of each episode, they show that they actually really do love, and that'd be a more American.
Saccharine sweet.
Yes. So they do fight, but hey, do you know what? They're one big happy family, but that is not the case, and I don't think it does change. Yeah. And we can discuss the relationship between Sybil and Basil is prominent in this episode. We can chat about that as we go through, I think.
Fair.
In order to do that, we need to begin.
How are we going to do that?
Summary?
Sure.
Crack on.
In the wedding party, Basil takes moral objection to an amorous young couple's antics. But when he catches the eye of a continental guest himself, can he stick to that ethical code? Or will he be tempted by a little je ne sais quoi?
You never get the impression that Basil would be tempted. I suppose his ego likes the thought of it.
Yeah, maybe. Do you think he's asexual?
I wouldn't go that far.
Do you think Basil and Sybil have kids that have grown up and left the family?
No.
You're sure they don't, or you just don't think they do?
I don't think it's ever discussed, so I'm pretty sure they don't. But if we're just talking about from what we understand, what we know about the characters, I would guess the way it's been written that no, they don't have. I would not be surprised, and in fact, we can chat about this perhaps in another episode. I think they got together a little bit later in life.
Okay.
Certainly later for the time, where perhaps people were getting married and together in their early 20s.
Okay.
It would not have surprised me, actually, to find that perhaps one of them had been divorced and this is the second marriage. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Anyway, we're off at a tangent.
Yes, let's go to the bar.
Where Sybil seems to be enjoying herself with a male guest as she laughs heartily whilst the Major complains to Basil about the heat.
Yes, and Basil complains to the Major about his wife's laugh.
Yeah, understandably.
Some kind of combination of a machine gun and a seal, I think he goes with.
But he's getting some attention of his own when a Mrs. Penwar enters and thanks him for his map of Torquay before being introduced to the Major. And we see, I think, if you look in the background, we see Sybil take note of this. A little bit of...
Yeah, one row for him, one row for her, I guess.
Yeah.
I like, this is one of my favourite bits of this entire episode, that Basil nails his French enchanté, but he utterly fails with his formidable.
Yeah, formidable. They are then startled again. They are then startled by another Sybil machine gun-like laugh, and Basil jokes that her finishing school was bombed.
Mrs. Pinoir orders a Ricard.
Well, she tries to order one, but
Basil's clearly never heard of a Ricard, so she gets a sherry.
she does indeed. And she confirms to the Major that she is French.
That's not the most obvious question, but it's right up there.
Well, I suppose she could be Belgian.
Luxembourgish.
Now, whilst getting the drinks, Basil informs Sybil that they are out of nuts. But she pays no attention to this and is happy for Basil to sort that out himself, providing that he can extract himself from Mrs. Pinoir.
Well, this is at odds entirely to her attitude in episode 1,
Yeah.
when she followed Basil around the hotel, demanding that he pour drinks for the family that were in the bar.
Although it is consistent with her not lifting a finger.
True.
We also find out that as it's Manuel's birthday, he has the night off. Well, he's meant to have the night off.
Yeah, we'll find out what happens to him a wee bit later on.
And so, in a seethe, Basil mentions to the Major that he saw How to Marry Your Wife 6 times, and then leaves the laughing Sybil to go and get some nuts from the kitchen.
I think he passes the old ladies on his way to the kitchen.
And I thought that not only was Sybil quite cruel, but she is openly flirting with some guy at the bar in front of everyone, and it's just a bit...
Yeah, I think she is imposing rules here. I will do what I want, and you will do what I want.
Yeah. But Sybil, she's not...
He doesn't. Yeah, we don't really see Basil challenge Sybil's behaviour the way that Sybil challenges Basil's behaviour. I mean, you might have a jab at her about something she says or something she thinks, but he doesn't really try to make her stop acting in a certain way or start acting in a different way.
Yeah. As you said, he passes Tibbs and Gatsby. I think one of them suggests that he's getting taller.
They're worried about him, as always.
And at this point, Polly enters with a boyfriend.
I wrote paramour.
Very generous.
Because we're doing French this week, aren't we?
And they are caught kissing by the now fairly angry Basil. But I think he has a point. She's an employee of the hotel. She's leaning over the reception and kissing a stranger. It's not appropriate behaviour for an employee.
Correct.
Even when she's off duty. You can't do that
I
in your
think
own...
It's fair enough.
Yeah.
He does, though, do it in a way that is deliberately meant to embarrass her.
Yes. The boyfriend's called Richard Turner. And I think Basil refers to him as Richard Turnip, who he sees off.
After Richard leaves, Basil gives Polly a dressing down.
Not that there's much to dress down.
No, he does point out later on that they've done away with the idea of topless high tea, so she'll have to change.
Yeah. Now, as a young lad watching this as a teenage boy, this episode brings back some fond memories.
We'll move on swiftly from that.
Okay.
Polly gets a good laugh at Basil's attempt to describe the hotel as a nice, respectable high-end.
Yeah, and now I understand Polly's response at this, but it's not the type of thing that you should be doing in front of your boss.
No, I wonder if she's being a bit too familiar there.
I think so. And perhaps they've had a few drinks.
Maybe. She does say that it was her plan anyway to change, but he calls her back one more time because she left her sketchbook lying around once more.
Yes, I think he glances. I'm not sure if it's faux bemusement or if he really doesn't.
Well, she's been drawing nudes, obviously, like maybe still life, but certainly it's naked people.
Well, he's happy enough to flick through them.
Yes, but it gets on his mind because when the phone rings, he answers it Fawlty Towers. He's quite sympathetic and saddened to hear that Audrey's partner has left her once again.
No, he's not.
Well, he makes out to Audrey that he's quite sympathetic.
He's clearly been
Sarcastic?
not sarcastic, but unimpressed or disinterested.
Yeah, faux sympathy, we'll say.
Yeah.
After this call, or just before the end of this call, a couple arrive and they have a booking.
Yeah, and he perceives some immoral intentions as I think they've maybe had a few drinks and they're being a bit playful with each other. And
A bit playful.
Well, they're messing around.
They're not acting with any decorum.
But you shouldn't have to.
I'm not saying they have to, I'm just saying they're not.
No. I also thought it was a sign of the times. I think Alan, quite unpleasantly, Alan's the chap and Jean, I think, is the woman. They laugh at Basil's suit.
Yeah, it's rude.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure at the time what Alan was wearing was the height of fashion. But looking back now Basil's not got the best looking suit, but you could walk down the street today with Basil's suit on and you would not be laughed and pointed at. But if you had to walk down wearing what Alan's wearing,
Yeah,
you would attract a few
I
glances.
think that's fair to say.
Uh,
They claim to be married, but Jean unwittingly exposes them by identifying some mail addressed to her in her own surname on the wall.
yeah, and this seems to put Basil out, especially when they request the only room with a double bed.
Now, what's going on here? Oh, I can't give you a double room, then.
Oh, Lord.
It's against the law.
What law?
The law of England. Nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with you.
Nothing at all. I can give you 2 singles if you like, but,
Look, shall we go somewhere else?
excuse me.
Well, there's my key. And now I'm off to paint the town red.
Thank you so much.
Well, perhaps I'll see you later this evening?
Yes, my wife and I will be up till quite late tonight, thank you.
I don't believe a word. Excuse me. We'll have 2 singles then, if that's all right with the police.
2 singles, certainly. Now,
Next to each other.
next to each other. Oh, dear, we can't do that. What a shame. Now,
Evening.
Good evening.
A double, is it? We'd like a double.
2 singles, dear. Not married. Now, What? Nothing, dear. I'm dealing with it.
Well, 17 and 18 are free. You'd have to share a bath.
Audrey called. I'll handle it. George has left her again.
Oh, no.
Now, we've got one on the first floor, one right up at the top.
Shall I deal with this, Basil?
I'm dealing with it, dear.
No, dear, that's all right. Now you wanted 2 singles.
I said I'd deal with it.
Do you mind sharing a bathroom?
Look, I was here first.
Well, it's my turn now, then.
I fought the Korean War, you know. I killed 4 men.
He was in the catering corps. He used to poison them.
Couple of things about that clip. I know you've got a
Yeah.
question. But what I would ask you is, do you think that Basil's puritanical attitude here is how he normally would act? Or do you think it's because of the Sybil flirting with the guy in the bar and Mrs. Penwar being around? Do you think that's changed?
No, I think he would always, if it was an unmarried couple, make them take 2 singles.
You think?
Oh, well, for starters, you can charge them for 2 rooms.
Yeah, that's not why he's doing it.
That's not why he's doing it. I think that would just be his standard position.
Okay, fair enough. Now, what do you want to bring up?
The Korean War.
Yeah.
So he would have been the right age to fight in the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he fought in the Korean War?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't make sense for him to say this if he hadn't.
Yeah, but I don't think he killed anyone necessarily. I don't think he killed 4 people.
No, it's not necessarily the case. I certainly think he was probably involved in the Korean War.
In catering, which would make sense now that he runs a hotel.
Yeah, maybe. That's fair. So they're both telling the truth, except about the deaths.
Yeah.
Basil is now in the office. I think he's looking for something.
No, he's listening in to
Or he's just
what's going on
listening
out
to what
there.
they're saying. Okay,
Yes.
he's distracted.
Yes, by Manuel, who makes quite a palaver out of asking if it's okay for him to go out for the evening and thanking him for his kindness in giving him an umbrella for his birthday.
Yeah, and also all of his kindness since coming to the country and training him and helping him.
Basil, however, has no time for this and simply shepherds him back out mid-sentence before resorting to ripping up his little speech.
The written note that Manuel has.
Now, at this point, Sybil walks in and demands the key to room 12, resulting in Basil taking this out on the persistent Manuel with a punch to the face.
I think that's very unreasonable.
You think?
I know it's very unreasonable.
And as Manuel leaves, Sybil rather inconsiderately tells him to take the couple's bags.
Yeah, he's got his night off.
He's actually walking out the door dressed in his civvies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least he's understood what she had to say.
yeah, that's true.
As Alan and Jean head to their room, they bump into Polly, who appears to know them.
Yeah, that's what we find out. And we also find out that Jean's parents, or stepfather and mother, are coming down the next
Night for a wedding.
Yes, that's why it's called the wedding party.
Polly says she's not really meant to hobnob with the guests, but she goes up the stairs with them.
Hmm. And we also find out, I think Jean's a designer because she has a dress for Polly to wear,
Yes, she's made
which
one,
she's
an
looking
original.
forward to trying on.
When they get to their room, Alan realises he needs batteries for his razor, and Polly says that there should be a chemist open in town, and he heads back down.
He does, but did you notice? I didn't like it too much. He sort of sneers at Manuel as he leaves.
Does he?
Yeah,
Maybe he's a big racist.
could be, yeah.
Or classist of some kind.
Maybe.
Anyhow, he heads down the stairs, and the girls go into the room room 12, and Emmanuel's standing there baffled. He's got this key for the room and no one to give it to, so he just throws it through the door.
Downstairs, Alan approaches the still smarting Basil and asks if there is a chemist open, which is obviously taken the wrong way by the outraged proprietor who can't hide his disgust.
Yeah, and he tells him no, so Alan asks if he has a couple.
Yes. But before that, he tells him that the chemists are all shut and suggests that it's a bit of a blow for him. Now, did you think that was quite risque for the time?
I think it's one of those ones that you get away with saying that wasn't what we meant, even though everyone listening who's an adult knows it's what you meant.
So you think that the script editors at the BBC read that, didn't pick up on it?
Possibly.
Ah.
Or maybe they thought it was ambiguous enough that they could leave it in and plausibly deny that that's what the joke was.
Yeah. And again, it was BBC Two, so it was more arty, I suppose, at the time.
Yeah.
And I think, we shouldn't forget John Cleese's background. I mean, Monty Python had lots of, well, not lots, but had nudity in it, as well as more subversive and risque subject matter,
Sure.
as we know. And as you said there, Alan starts to ask if perhaps Basil could lend him some, and what happens?
Basil is, I think he's put out, I think he thinks he's genuinely been having the mickey taken out of him. This man is having a laugh at his expense and it upsets him. He thinks he's been made a fool of.
And what was it he says? I know what you people got up to.
Well, Alan explains that it's batteries that he wants.
That's even worse.
And Basil says he knows what people like you get up to and it's disgusting. And we heard at the top of the show, Alan then says no, it's for his razor. And Basil, rather than saying, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood, pivots to saying that not shaving is disgusting.
Before heading into the office for a cringe.
He actually cringes himself. He recognises his own embarrassing statement.
We are now up in Basil and Sybil's bedroom. I think this must be the first time as well.
Yep, separate beds. They've actually put a unit between them, so there's no prospect of pushing them together.
So this is interesting. You asked earlier what you thought was the relationship between Basil and Sybil. Is there a love there? And I think this shows that there isn't really, certainly there doesn't appear to be any physical love. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the character was written that they didn't have any physical contact between each other. There was no chance of that happening between the two of them.
Yeah, because he kissed her in the first episode and she told him to stop.
However, we do see in this episode there can still be a little bit of jealousy when the other is getting attention.
I think we see in this scene from Sybil's behaviour that she has no concern at all about Basil's feelings. She's doing what she wants to do and she doesn't care how it makes him feel. She's eating and smoking.
It's horrible, isn't it? That was one of the things that I alluded to earlier about her being really quite annoying in this episode. Lying in bed, and again, I know it's the 70s and there was a different attitude towards, I suppose, smoking, etc. But you're lying in the bedroom, eating chocolates, smoking at the same time with a mouthful of chocolate, snorting and laughing, and
she's reading her erotic humour.
Yes, well, Basil reads Jaws.
Yes, the novel on which the film franchise was based.
What's Sybil's magazine?
Sexy Laughs.
Yeah. Now, obviously Jaws was Jaws, but Sexy Laughs was fictitious. And it was a play on Sybil's laugh in this episode.
Yeah, she's laughing slightly differently at this point, but in a different way from earlier.
Yeah, but equally irritating.
Yes. It's almost like she's doing it to be irritating. And then she compounds this ill behaviour with taking a phone call from her pal and just sitting there talking while Basil's trying to read.
Yeah, it's Audrey again with her soap opera private life. And we hear the beginnings of her catchphrase. I know, yes, I know. And I liked Basil's question to himself. Well, why is she telling you?
He decides he's going to get up and do something else.
Well, he's saved eventually by the bell as he has to go and let in a guest who has forgot their pass key. As Sybil was certainly not contemplating doing that herself.
I mean, he says that, but when he gets down, he undoes a bolt. So what was the key going to do? Anyway, it's expected by Basil that he'll find Alan and Jean when he opens the store, but no.
Yeah, I think he says to Sybil before he goes down that is no doubt the Kama Sutra set. Yeah, who is it?
It's Mrs. Penoir.
Yeah, a flirty and tipsy Mrs. Penoir. which immediately changes Basil's attitude.
Yeah, because when she was going out, I think she was a bit perturbed. He was really curt with her when he was talking to Alan and Jean when they were checking in. But everything is forgiven now because he's in a better mood, she's in a better mood, and they have a little bit of a chat.
But after dropping her purse, Basil bends down to retrieve it. And in good old slapstick fashion, Penwar ends up on top of him. Unfortunately for Basil, at this point, Joan and Alan walk in.
Ah, Mr. Fawlty, you're so charming.
Well, one does one's best.
I hope Mrs. Fawlty appreciates how lucky she is.
Well, I think probably not, in fact, but... Oh, sorry, please. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Ah, there we are. Sorry. There you are.
I'm awfully sorry.
No, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, the front doorbell went just a moment or two ago, and I thought to myself, I expect that'll be Alan, and so down I go, and lo and behold, it's not you at all. It's Mrs. Penwar. Have you met Alan and this is Mrs. Penwar? She's an antique dealer, you know, I mean, she deals in antiques. She's not frightfully old or anything. So I let her in just 10 seconds, hardly time to say good evening. In she comes, drops the thing, down I go, down she goes, and there you are. Bless my soul, it's going, golly, is that the time? My goodness, I was thinking it was 10:15. My God, well, I better get to bed. I can't stand around talking all night. Gotta get an early night. Bye. Sorry.
Classic Basil Fawlty there.
That was very impressively performed, wasn't it?
It was, and I think we can see from Alan and the other actors that they appreciated it, as well as the audience.
The audience reaction was quite something, I think, to that one.
Yeah. And it's a type of scene, type of performance that I don't think you can repeat. I don't think you can really have take 2 and 3 for that.
I don't know. It's an actor's craft.
Maybe, but the energy, yeah, but if you were doing it 2 or 3 or 4 times, your fellow cast wouldn't be laughing along each time.
Yeah, probably not the second or third time,
Yeah.
Anyway, Alan says he has a phone call to make, so Jean and Mrs. Penwar head up the stairs.
They do. Back in Basil's bedroom, Sybil asks who it was, and Basil tells her about the couple, but leaves out Mrs. Penwar until she is heard saying goodnight, and he is forced to mention her.
I think he denies knowing who she is or anything else.
She shouts into him, and he's obviously feeling a little guilty, as he now asks how Audrey is.
Yeah, Sybil says she's terrible, and he replies, good.
The bedroom door is then chapped, and in a panic, he shouts out to Sybil that there is someone there, to make it clear, I think, that he is not alone.
She asks why he's yelling, and he goes over to answer it.
Yeah, but on opening the door, who does he find?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Until a few seconds later when Manuel just jumps out at him and knocks him to the floor. And then kneels next to him apologising and telling him he loves him. At which point Alan comes up from his phone call looking a bit perturbed and then backs away down the stairs again.
It's the next morning and we're in the dining room where Manuel is now struggling to work with a terribly severe hangover as Basil misunderstands Mrs. Penwar's coffee request.
I enjoyed that because she ordered a café au lait, which would be what I would drink in France. But you think she's saying café au lait, mixing her French and her Spanish.
He does, however, agree to look at her bedroom window later, as apparently it is stuck.
Yeah, Manuel stumbles through with near Norman Wisdom levels of physical comedy.
Yes, very much.
He's not quite got the pratfall the first time out.
But he does collapse in a heap on the floor. And whilst trying to get him up, Basil ends up spooning him, and Alan remarks that he is at it again.
Yeah, and says Jean says it's disgusting. So are they homophobic? Are they winding Basil up?
No, I think that they're winding Basil up. They're acting like this. They're acting disapprovingly because they know that this would irritate and annoy Basil even more.
I liked Manuel's response here. Basil tells him he has to get up and get back to the kitchen. He says, no, I cannot, I die here.
So what does Basil do?
He picks him up, not quite as easily as he did in the previous episode, but he manages to hump him through to the kitchen.
Out at reception, Sybil checks in Jean's mother and stepfather, who ask for sandwiches to be sent up. But did you notice that they didn't request any type?
They're just sandwiches.
Yeah, but I mean, you wouldn't do that. You would say I'd have some chicken or ham or
not
cheese.
In England. This is English.
What if you're a vegetarian?
This is what happens in England. You get high tea.
In the 70s,
sandwiches.
certainly.
Yep. There'll be cucumber sandwiches. Anyway, they're also getting coffee, and Mr. Lloyd heads up the stairs while his wife makes a phone call.
Yes, where Basil comes out to bring their cases up because obviously Manuel is in no fit state and seems annoyed that he is not acknowledged sufficiently, even though she's on the phone.
Yeah.
What's he expecting her to do?
Maybe give him a wave or something, I don't know.
So he heads up to the room where he walks in and then back out as he is shocked to see Jean hug and kiss Philip. That's her stepfather.
Yeah, he's outraged. He thinks this is some kind of swinging event going on now.
But rather than leave them to it, he heads back down to find Mrs. Lloyd on her way up and so tries to delay her. Now surely, if you are disgusted by all this behaviour,
You want them caught?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, apparently not.
But no, he tries to show her the new door in the kitchen.
It's interesting, yeah, so he's trying to protect her from finding out about this or protect him from being caught.
I don't know if you were being generous, you might say he was doing it for her benefit, or it could be that his hotel's reputation...
Yeah, he maybe just doesn't want an incident in the hotel, so all he's doing is, for nobody's benefit except his own, keeping them apart until there's not a moment.
But this is the first of two incidents. Now, looking at it today, it seems creepy. If this guy's trying to get you to come into the kitchen and look at his ceiling and then later on it's into another bedroom, it becomes more sinister.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, and again, he has to resort to his old army injury when she tries to leave.
It's his go-to method, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to work for a period anyway.
I think at one point we see Manuel in a wicker crate with his feet sticking out.
Yeah, Mrs. Lloyd notices and questions what it is, and Basil initially uses this distraction to his benefit.
Yeah.
Until he sees Jean coming back down and he understands that the coast, or he perceives the coast to be clear.
Yeah, so now Mrs. Lloyd's concerned about Manuel and Basil's hurrying her upstairs.
Yes.
Away from that.
However, by this point, Polly is now in the Lloyd's room, where she is giving a big family hug to Philip.
Yeah, but Basil, putting his head through the door again, sees the same thing he saw before, is stunned and outraged, and takes Mrs. Lloyd to a different room.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's actually got a little bit creepy here.
Yeah, his cover story is that he wants to be upfront with her. He knows this room's nicer than the one that she's got. If there's an issue, she can raise it later, but he didn't want to let this be something that was unspoken.
Yeah, so she's rightly a little bit unsettled. And after seeing Polly leave, Basil lets her out, and she, understandably, is obviously very relieved to be back with her husband.
Yeah, but her bafflement is compounded when she realises the two rooms are identical.
Yes. We're now in Jean and Alan's room, where Polly is trying on her dress that Jean has made for her.
Yep, she likes it, although it's a bit tight across the bust. In fact, she particularly likes it, it's a bit tight across the bust, I think, from the way she prefaces that.
She strips back off, and again, childhood memories.
Anyway, Alan is having his back rubbed by Jean at this point. He's obviously got some kind of tissue injury.
Yes, which he very, very vocally appreciates.
He does, and Basil overhears this and thinks there's some kind of weird threesome going on, and he's reinforced in that view when Polly comes out the room with buttons undone on her top.
Now this nearly tips him over the edge, and trying to compute what he thinks is happening, runs down the stairs after Polly and fires her on the spot.
Well, he tells her, yes, get back to reception in 2 minutes with her hat and her coat.
Yeah. He then tells Sybil that they are going, obviously referring to the guests upstairs.
Yeah, and he marches into the Lloyd's room and tells them to leave, but they're not there.
No, because they are now in Jean's room being told by Alan of all Basil's antics.
They're all laughing at him as he comes in, and he tells them, and I think he genuinely is feeling hurt by their behaviour.
Yeah.
And he tells them they've had a good time at his expense and he's sorry, but they have to leave. And then he comes back and says he's not sorry because maybe they're behind the times in Torquay, but this kind of behaviour is not acceptable.
And he's going to put a stop to it.
He storms out.
Yeah. Back down in the office, he tells Sybil what he has done and why, but is stunned when Sybil explains the reality of it all. So this is the second time, I suppose, in this episode where he's got a major cringe on.
Yeah. There's a long pause
yes.
as he considers the situation, and then he asks what it has to do with Polly.
Yeah, well, he's trying to grasp at something that might put him in the right, or at least put someone in the wrong.
Yeah.
And it is explained that, yeah, she's an old childhood friend.
He's furious and embarrassed, I think, at this stage. And he asks Sybil why she didn't tell him and why they didn't tell him, and he doesn't see why he should take the blame.
Well, he's trying to absolve himself from this, and initially refuses to go back up and put things right until Sybil puts her foot down and he is forced to act.
Tell them you made a mistake.
Oh, brilliant! Brilliant! Is that what made Britain great? And through folly and made a mistake. Oh, you got brains, punch cake! Well, very nice, very nice. Take them off, get back to work. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I made a mistake. I'm so sorry I made a mistake. I'm so sorry, but my wife has made a mistake. I don't know how she did, but she did. She's made a complete pudding of the whole thing as usual. It'll be perfectly all right, you'd say. I've sorted it all out. I'm frightfully sorry, but you know what women are like. They've got one brain between the lot of them. Well, not all of them, but I mean, some of them have, including my wife. So please do stay, and see you all later on. Thank you so much. I'm just saying, please do stay. My wife made a most dreadful mistake.
Yes, I think she probably did.
That last comment, does he think that Basil's gay?
No,
Okay.
I think he just thinks he's unhinged.
Okay.
I enjoyed that, I must admit. Basil, but again, putting his foot in it and just ramping things up. A lot of these situations can be diffused or could be diffused, but he piles it upon himself.
Yeah, he does.
We're back down at the reception where the Major gets his paper from Basil, and we find out that Sybil is spending the night at Audrey's. She's obviously enraged and are just totally peeved with the whole situation.
The Major thinks it's very decent of Sybil to listen to Audrey's rubbish and says she's a fine woman. But Basil disagrees.
Yes.
And the Major concedes the point.
Yeah, and leaves. And at this point, Mrs. Penwar appears and tells Basil to keep on the romantic recording of Chopin that he had started to play, before flirting with him, quite overtly this time, and saying that deep down she thinks he is a old romantic.
He says no.
But for some reason, he follows her upstairs. Again, this is quite inappropriate, the manager of a small hotel following you up from reception at night time.
Yeah, she asks when they get to the hall area whether he can fix that window or whether he has fixed that window in her
Well, no,
room.
before that, we should say that she finds out that Sybil is staying at a friend's, and I think she makes a remark about when the cat's away. But you're right, she asks him to go in and fix her window, which he does.
And she says your wife shouldn't leave you with strange women.
Yeah. And then brings the seduction levels up a few notches by claiming that it's very hot. She'll sleep au natural that evening, although it's not as much fun on your own. And at this point, the nervous Basil, who, as we said earlier, I think likes a little bit of attention, but
To a point, yeah.
to a point when it comes down to it, is either scared or...
He's either unwilling or unable
Yes.
to do anything more. So he makes an excuse and leaves.
He does.
Downstairs, though, we see that Sybil is actually back.
We do. We get a quick shot of her coming back and hearing a noise coming from the kitchen. So back up in Basil's bedroom, he is very nervous now, especially when he opens the door to Mrs. Penwar, who wants an alarm call and is also returning his recorder, which he brought up with him.
Yeah, she says that she thinks he left it so he could come for it in the middle of the night, and she doesn't want him knocking on her. That's the exact opposite of what she was suggesting
Yeah.
earlier.
He tries to laugh this off, but when she's left, he bolts himself in. However, Sybil comes up and tries to obviously get into her bedroom, but Basil assumes that it's the French woman again.
Yeah, even when Sybil speaks, he doesn't pick up on it, and he says that she can't get in, his wife's come back.
He pretends to snore, calls her a silly tart.
Once he realises it is Sybil, he acts like he was having a terrible, terrible dream.
Well, I thought that was a great bit of thinking on his feet. He realises, yeah, it's her. He ruffles up his hair, opens the door, and pretends that he's just
To be fair, he hasn't done anything wrong. He could tell her the truth and it would be okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing I mentioned just a moment ago and in the first episode. This, if your stress level, if you get anxious, Fawlty Towers isn't necessarily the show for you, because you're always thinking to yourself, just say or do this and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
But, he compounds his problems often.
Sybil says there's a burglar downstairs, so initially I thought is she just trying to make him leave the room? She's going to lock it behind him. But no, she thought the noises Manuel made were a burglar.
Yes. So down at the reception, a still quite unsteady Manuel leaves the kitchen in the dark, only to be clobbered unconscious by a trouserless Basil with a frying pan.
Yes.
And as he sits astride the prone Spaniard, the wedding party returns and puts the lights on to see the pair of them in what looks like a compromising position.
Yeah, I didn't understand why Mr. Lloyd looked so upset about it.
Well, I think it's just, well, you might be. I mean, we're looking at this from a sitcom perspective, but if I walked into a hotel and in the reception and the owner was trouserless, lying on top of the waiter holding a frying pan, I'd be a bit perturbed.
Well, maybe if you take the absurdity out of it.
Yeah. And obviously being exposed again to the guests, Basil is a bit annoyed, and before the credits roll, we see him lift the frying pan for a further beating.
That's the end.
It is. And I must say, I enjoyed this. Although the characters, and particularly Sybil, were irritating to an extent and frustrating.
It's true.
There were some classic moments in this episode. And
Yes,
some absolutely fantastic performances by John Cleese.
In particular.
Yeah. Before we get on to the other stuff, let's hear some social begging.
It's not begging.
Sorry, requesting.
Yes, we need our listeners, if you possibly could, to rate and review this podcast on iTunes. It makes a big difference to us and to others who might be interested in hearing the show. I know they probably don't matter to you that much, but it would be great because the more folk that listen to the show, the more chat there'll be around it, the more entertaining it'll be. And a lot of that will happen on social media, where we're at Fawlty Podcast on both Facebook and on Twitter. And if you want to discuss one of the podcast episodes or one of the Fawlty Towers episodes, there's a post up for each one at fawltytowerspodcast.com.
If I remember next time, I'm going to ask you to do that at the beginning of the show.
So folk can't skip it.
Yeah. Well, they could skip it, but hey.
Yeah. I'll make it longer than 45 seconds and we'll be fine.
This episode was first broadcast on the 3rd of October 1975. Yes, I'm still not born at this point. In fact, I'm not born for any of this first season.
You can't say that about the second season.
Yvonne Gillan played Mrs. Penoir. She was born in 1931 in Edinburgh, I think. She's not French. And has appeared in Chariots of Fire, Empire of the Sun, Crossroads, Dr. Finlay's Casebook, Z Cars, and On the Margin, amongst other things. She was married to the movie producer Michael Gill and was the mother of the recently deceased journalist and critic A.A. Gill, a famous face in the cultural scene in the UK.
A well-known name, anyway.
Jean was played by April Walker, born in 1941. She has acted in Judge John Deed, Minder, The Kenny Everett Show, and The Two Ronnies, as well as Anna Karenina. Apparently, she was cast as Sarah Jane Smith, a Doctor Who companion, but was vetoed from the part by the incumbent Doctor John Pertwee, who didn't like the chemistry between them.
That's unfortunate for her.
And finally, Alan was played by Trevor Adams. He died in 2000, aged just 54, from cancer. He starred in The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, The Professionals, Crown Court, Groupie Girl, and Z Cars, but retired from acting to become a successful solicitor.
Fair enough.
Any trivia for us?
A couple of things about that final scene. I think John Cleese mentions that he doesn't know why he drops the saucepan at one point before picking it up again. He didn't really like that. He thinks maybe that final tableau should have been a freeze frame, and that it might have been better to have the view from where the guests were. But that would, I think, be a bit weird because you never get that view in this scene, in this set. So.
Yeah.
It's also a scene where Andrew Sachs says he was injured by a saucepan. There was a padded saucepan used in dress rehearsal, but on the night of the live recording, John Cleese picked up the wrong saucepan and actually hit him hard enough that he couldn't get up. And that's obviously what's on film.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's all.
Okay. What have I got here for us? Mrs. Penoir's drink of choice, or a card, is an aperitif created by Paul Ricard in 1932. That the company merged with Pernod, so you still get Ricard Pernod.
Is it nothing to do with Hamilton Ricard that played for Middlesbrough?
Yeah, great grandfather.
Oh, okay.
You might find this interesting. Episode names only began to be used in the 1980s for the VHS releases. So when these episodes were broadcast, they weren't necessarily assigned a name. However, some TV guides did have names, and this was originally called Sex.
It's snappier and possibly more relevant to the subject of the episode.
I would suggest so, yeah. Not sure why they changed it.
Maybe a bit guarded about these things. Maybe,
Really?
Maybe it would change the rating of the VHS
Maybe.
from PG to 15.
It's also unusual in season 1 to have more than one plot, but in this case we've got an A, a B and a C. So the B plot was Mrs. Penwar, and the C plot was Manuel's birthday. But we've not had that to this point. It's always just been one.
Yeah, and they almost don't cross at all. There's just moments when they're all happening, but
Yeah. What else do I have here? Okay, apparently Sybil's laugh is based on Connie Booth's real life laugh.
really,
Yeah. Do you fancy a bit of Columbo connection?
always.
Okay. This might be interesting to some of our listeners.
A
If
few-
you've not listened to the Columbo podcast before, you really should.
Yeah, go and listen to those 70 odd episodes, 80 episodes, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then come back and listen to this fact.
Okay. So How to Murder Your Wife was referenced. It was directed by Richard Quine. He directed 3 Columbo episodes. And the cast included Mary Wicks, George Hoagland, Geoffrey Sayre, Dick Cherney, Leon Alton, Norman Stevens, Murray Pollock, Monty O'Grady, Tom McDonough, Bobby Gilbert, George Holmes, William Bryant, who all appeared in Columbo.
I thought it was a Jack Lemmon movie.
It is?
Oh, okay. He just wasn't in Columbo.
No. I mentioned George Holmes. There was also somebody Sherlock in it as well.
Really?
Yeah. And Jack Albertston. He played the Grandpa Joe in the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka.
It all comes back full circle.
It does.
That's a reference to last week's episode, obviously.
Yes, of course. Before we go, do you have a favourite scene this week?
I think my favourite bit was when the Major said to Basil that his wife's a fine woman, and Basil just disagreed with them altogether.
Okay, I'm going for the obvious. I'm going for the whole chemist and batteries scene.
Okay.
The sign?
Yes, so this was it looked to me like a further dilapidation of last week's one. So the S is still missing. The L, which was hanging off last week, is now gone. And the W in Tower is starting to go.
Next week, we have the Hotel Inspectors.
So there'll be no podcast.
No, not until we get rid of them. Of course, we'll be back next week.
Great. Well, until then.
Cheerio.
Bye.